here today to begin a series of podcasts on books that I've authored, and I'd like to begin with a bit of an introduction of myself. Hi, my name is Doug Collins. I'm a career participant in cybersecurity, having spent 35 years either auditing it or consulting it in it, which I'm presently doing. Now here's the thing. I've determined that cybersecurity has a big problem that is so broad that I've had to write books describing it. These books are written in the structure of a huge audit finding dedicated in particular to company CEOs who must live with the high costs of the outcomes of this audit finding daily. I was not commissioned for this by anyone, I just delivered it. For your information, audit findings are presented in phases. Phase 1, the issues, which are real. Phase 2, the impacts, which are hypothesized. And Phase 3, the recommendations, which are obviously to be developed. I've written books covering each of these phases of the maiden cybersecurity finding. Here is the structure of my books as a roadmap for future reference. Firstly, my book, The New Architecture, describes the issues. Second, the fictional, although realistic impacts are addressed in my series of books, Quantum Worlds. Finally, the recommendations unfold in my upcoming book, Cybersecurity's Best Defense, due out June 2026, addressing past vulnerability causes, present AI dangers, as far-reaching as quantum computing exposure. This chapter of podcasts addresses the lead book of my series, Quantum Worlds, noted as my audit findings' most catastrophic impact. So without further ado, now to my book, Decryption Gambit. Sorry, I forgot, just one more thing of note. Firstly, all of my books are available at my website, dougcollinsauthor.com, or at your favorite global online book outlet. Now back to the subject at hand, Decryption Gambit. I'm here. The geopolitics of quantum supremacy. Nations have always competed for military advantage, but what happens when the battlefield is invisible? The weapons are made of entangled particles, and winning means being able to read every secret your adversaries have, while they can read none of yours. In Decryption Gambit, Doug Collins maps the geopolitics of quantum supremacy, and it is a genuinely unsettling portrait of the world we are moving into. Let's start with the conference room in NATO headquarters, Brussels, because Collins writes it brilliantly. The Great Oval Table, usually a symbol of unity and cooperation among the alliance members, now feels like the staging ground for a crumbling edifice. The screens lining the walls stream real-time feeds of classified files bleeding onto the darknet. Faces that were once confident are now marked by doubt, exhaustion, and unease. The Secretary General is trying to project control. He is failing, not because he lacks skill or will, but because the situation genuinely defies the framework he's been trained to operate within. NATO's entire strategic posture has been built around certain assumptions: that Allied communications are secure, that intelligence can be protected, that the technological superiority of Western nations provides a meaningful defense advantage. Silentium has invalidated all three assumptions simultaneously. What Collins captures with real precision here is the gap between the institutional response and the actual nature of the threat. The institutional response is to look for familiar patterns. Is this an act of war? Should we retaliate? Who is the named adversary? What are our options? These are the questions the room knows how to ask. But Elena Marceau is trying to explain that these questions are the wrong ones. The threat is not a state actor in the conventional sense. It's a mineral that has changed the physics of information security. Retaliating against China's quantum program doesn't undo what Silentium makes possible. Patching specific systems doesn't address the foundational vulnerability. The architecture of global digital trust is being undermined. and no military action, cyber or conventional, addresses that. This mismatch between the nature of the crisis and the institutional capacity to respond is one of Collins' sharpest observations about modern geopolitics. We have built enormous, sophisticated institutions for managing the threats of the 20th century, and those institutions are structurally ill-equipped to deal with the paradigm shift, technological disruptions that operate beneath the threshold of conventional military conflict. Meanwhile, in Beijing, General Liu is watching the same events unfold with an entirely different emotional register. He is not panicking, he is assessing. Collins gives us access to Liu's perspective as he stares at a digital map, flickering with strategic overlays, his attention moving with surgical precision across streams of incoming intelligence. Liu's response to NATO's institutional panic is almost satisfaction. Not because he is indifferent to the consequences of ordinary people, but because he is being operating from a strategic framework that anticipated exactly this type of systemic vulnerability. Liu's vision, as Collins articulates it, is not about conventional military victory. It's about information dominance, the ability to see everything while remaining unseen. In the quantum era, the most powerful position is not the one with the most missiles or the biggest economy. It's the one that can read all communications, validate all intelligence, predict all moves, while remaining opaque to everyone else. Silentium is the key to that position. What Collins does particularly well is show how this vision, from Liu's perspective, is not simply aggression. It's a response to what Liu sees as a structurally unfair global order, one where Western technological dominance has long given Western nations advantages in intelligence, in financial systems, in diplomatic leverage. Silentium, in Liu's framework, is not a weapon of conquest, but a lever for rebalancing. This doesn't make his choice ethical, but it makes them comprehensible. And a threat you understand is more dangerous than a threat dismissed as simply irrational. The diplomatic choreography that follows the initial crisis is fascinating and frustrating in the way that real diplomacy often is. The United States pushes for an emergency summit. China's official response is deliberately opaque. Official denials mixed with cryptic broadcasts threatening to render encryption obsolete altogether. This is classic strategic communication, saying enough to signal strength while maintaining deniability about specific actions. NATO members begin to fracture along predictable lines. Smaller member states, ill-equipped to manage the fallout independently, feared abandonment by their more powerful partners. Calls for aggressive cyber retaliation clashed with calls for restraint. Political factions outside government seized the moment for nationalist, isolationist rhetoric. The alliance's fragile unity begins to show visible cracks. Collins is describing dynamics that will be immediately recognizable to anyone who has followed real NATO politics in recent years. The alliance is genuinely impressive as a military alliance when the threat is a conventional military one. It is far less coherent when the threat is invisible, diffuse, and technological in nature. Silentium exposes the limits of the alliance's architecture just as surely as it exposes the limits of its encryption. What the book ultimately reaches toward, through the painful, compromised diplomatic sequence, is the recognition that the only viable path in this new world is multilateral cooperation, not because the world's powers trust each other, but because the alternative is mutually assured digital destruction. If every major state deploys quantum-enabled capabilities against every other major state encrypted architecture, infrastructure, the result isn't one winner and several losers. It's the collapse of the global digital systems that all states depend on for their own functioning. This is an argument about interdependence, and Collins makes it without sentimentality. The character who reaches this conclusion don't do so because they become idealists. They do so because they've done the strategic math and realize that the competitive logic everyone has been operating under leads to a place nobody wants to be.